Right, here's problem number 2. Each day at camp, Joshua spends 20% of the money he had at the beginning of that day. At the end of the third day, he had only $2.56 left. How much money did he have at the beginning of the first day? I'm going to underline the word beginning, because we know how much he has at the end of the third day. We can figure out how much he has at the end of the second day and the first day, but we want the beginning of the first day. So we'd have to make sure we go back far enough. And in order to keep track of that, this is sort of my hint to you, is to keep track of where you're at in the days. So let's say I draw a few calendar days here. Alright, so this is day 1, day 2, day 3. So, and we know we're given that he has $2.56 at the end of the third day. Okay? So, I'm going to call x2 the amount of money he had at the end of the second day, and I'm going to call x1 the amount of money he had at the end of the first day. But we're asked to find the amount of money he had at the beginning of the first day, so I'm actually going to call that x0. Okay? So we have to make sure that when we're calculating the amount of money he had at the end of each day, that we go back far enough and go all the way to the beginning of the first day. So it helps to have some variables defined, and then you can keep track of where you're at, which day you're on. Okay? And my other hint to you would be just, you probably know this, so 20% is the same thing as 20 over 100. That's just by definition of a percent, right? And that's the same thing as 1/5, right? So 20 over 100 is 2 over 10, which is 1 over 5, right? So sometimes it's a little easier to work with the fraction instead of the decimal or the percentage. Okay? So here is my solution. Okay, so we're given that, I'm going to call actually x3 the amount of money he had at the end of the third day. And we know that that is $2.56, right? And he got to that point by, okay, he had some amount of money at the end of the second day, and he spent 20% of it, or 1/5 of it. Okay, so he took the amount he had at the beginning of the, or sorry, at the end of the second day, spent 20% of it, and that's how he ended up with $2.56. So you can see that 1x2 minus 1/5 x2, now this could be also be written as 5/5 x2. That just gives you 4/5 x2. So if 4/5 x2 is equal to $2.56, we can easily calculate x2, right? We could multiply, I'm just going to write this out, x2 is equal to 5/4 times $2.56. Alright? That's just by multiplying, our two sides are here and here, and if we multiply both sides by 5 and then divide by 4, okay, that's where the 5/4 comes from, then we'll get it, and then we can just calculate that out, and we'll find out, that x2 is equal to $3.20. Okay, so that's just, we divide $2.56 by 4, you get 64 cents, take that times 5, and you'll get $3.20. Okay, so once we've done one day, we can easily just do the same, follow the same reasoning and calculate the next day. So X2, we just found out, was $3.20, and that should just be 4/5 of X1, right? So that's the amount of money he had at the end of the second day is just 4/5 of the amount of money he had at the end of the first day. So again, we can just calculate that. We multiply by 5 and divide by 4. So X1 is equal to 5/4 of 320. And that gives you $4. Okay? So now we have the amount of money he had at the end of the first day, but we're asked to find the amount of money he had at the beginning of the first day. So we got to keep going. So X1 is equal to $4, and that was just 4/5 of the amount of money he had at the beginning of that day, right? Because he spent 1/5 of it, or 20% of it. And if you do that, X0 is equal to, divide by 4 and multiply by 5, and that gives you $5. Okay, so that's our answer. He had $5 at the beginning of the first day.